Thanks very much, Gloves. I reckon that's got to be up there with the best introduction I've ever had. It's wonderful to see a shed full of people like this. Information Days, which today is focused on, is very much a part of what we need to do. We're really heading out into some pretty rare space, I think, at a genetic level. So if we're out there with no one understanding what it's about, we're not talking to many people. So to see a shed filled like this with a really switched on looking crowd of people is it's a big part of what we do, and it's very much appreciated. So thank you for making the effort to be here. Who's clicking this? Hattie, you or me? Me.
Other way.
Who put that in?
I put that in. You wanted that there.
Well, that's a great slide to start with. That's a bit of a surprise to me. But while we're at it, Gloves gave a bit of a rundown on our team, and I'm happy to say that I could not be more proud of the team we've collected around us to drive this ship forward. And Gloves, who's been with us for about 4.5 years, is very much my right-hand man and a big reason behind why there's been so many innovations and so many changes made here. So it's wonderful to have you on board, Gloves, and thanks for getting the day rolling like you have. Yeah, that's our team. Gloves has introduced most of the team. You know, as I said, couldn't be more proud of the team we've got here. It's as good as I've seen, and there's some seriously good things going on behind the scenes here. And what you see on the surface today is the genetics, the rams, that side of it. But there's a huge amount that goes on behind the scenes, and that takes the whole team. So that's our team. Gloves has introduced them, and they're a cracking bunch. Quick overview of Mumblebone. This is the layout of the land. The country highlighted in blue is the country we own. There's about 4,000 hectares of that. The country in yellow is the country we lease. About 1,400 hectares there. So in the old school, it's about 13,000 acres under management. Mix of commercial and stud sheep. It's all merinos here. Bit of sideline cattle with agistment, but it's merinos that really absorb my headspace. So mix of stud and commercial operations. Currently lambing down 2,400 stud ewes, looking to grow that to 3,000 as quickly as we can to try and keep up to speed with the demand for modern genetics. Complementing that with a commercial ewes, looking to grow those numbers as well. So 8,000 ewes roughly at the moment, looking to grow that beyond, depending on what sort of country comes up in the district. And genetics. This is where it gets interesting, I reckon. So this is a graph that Ferg put together for me about 12 months ago. I asked him to tease out how skin wrinkle affects all the other traits that are important in a merino operation. And needless to say that everything's interconnected, particularly with skin, so it seems. So I'll just take you through a few of these, and don't feel you need to understand this graph as it is. I'll simplify it into a much easier to explain and understand version in just a minute. But while we're here, if we could just have a look at this green line across the page here, you'll see up the top, if this clicker's working, that's clean fleece weight. So the axis down the bottom is increasing breech wrinkle, so skin wrinkle increasing from left to right. And you'll see that green line is fleece weight. So the old school was that we need skin to cut wool, and there's still a lot of people in the industry that are promoting that sort of information. But I just find it interesting, and this is why I keep going back to data. The data is telling us that there's a very weak correlation now between skin wrinkle and fleece weight. So that may come as a bit of a surprise to some people in the room, but that's just what the evidence is telling us. The other one I'll just draw your attention to is this grey line here, the one that's falling pretty quickly. That's weaning weight. Growth rate and skin don't seem to mix very well, so as we increase skin wrinkle, we're slowing the growth rate of our sheep. And that's a really strong correlation. So in the modern world of growth and reproduction, surplus sheep and lamb sales and all that space being so important, we need to keep a really strong eye on the growth rate of our sheep. And an easy way to do that is to start winding back skin wrinkle. But I'll just take it on to the next slide and break this down into the positives and the negatives of skin wrinkle. That previous slide was not so easy to understand, but if we look at it this way, it'll make more sense as we go. Again, down the bottom, we've got breech wrinkle increasing from left to right, and then the positives of more skin or more wrinkle is just a little bit more wool, and I mean it's just a little bit more wool. That line may well have been steeper many years ago, but modern breeding is putting a lot of wool on a plain-bodied sheep, so the correlation now between skin wrinkle and fleece weight is now only very small. The other one that caught me a bit by surprise was micron, and I realise there's probably people in the room that have seen a bit of this information before. I just think it's important to bring everyone up to speed together, so we'll just go through this from the beginning again. But micron's the one that caught me a bit by surprise. It's actually easier to reduce micron with a little bit of skin in the game. But there are some other antagonisms that we'll get to. But not surprisingly, when fleece weight and micron were the major drivers of profitability in a merino enterprise, it made sense to select for these traits very heavily and to allow skin wrinkle into our flocks, or even select it into our flocks to accentuate the benefits of fleece weight and micron. But the game now is quite different And so there's some significant downsides to accepting skin wrinkle into our flocks, and it starts with condition score. So fat and muscle form 70% of condition score. Condition score underpin just about everything important in a modern merino enterprise, so they're critically important traits in my eyes. Staple length is another big one. We'll cover 6 month shearing a little later in the day in more detail, but length is critical to a 6 month shearing program. There's a whole heap of flow-on benefits from prem shearing or shearing every 6 months. We'll cover that in more detail, but staple length is hit very hard as soon as we accept skin wrinkle into our mix. Reproduction, one of the big profit drivers, it's also hit very hard. There's not a lot of upside in having skin, and repro to me is one of the most important traits to be focusing on in a balance of traits, and it's hit very hard as we allow skin into the mix, so we need to be very conscious of that. Growth rate I mentioned before on the previous slide. Finishing weather lambs, for those that are conscious of the time taken to finishing, an extra month to finish a wether, there's a cost involved in that, getting ewe lambs up to weight, all of those sort of modern high value profit drivers. Weight and growth rate is a key component of that, and that's all heavily compromised with the old school sort of skin wrinkle. Fly strike's another one, couple of wet years, great chance to find any sort of susceptibility in the flocks. It only takes a little bit of skin to maintain the moisture at a skin level to allow the flies in under those conditions to start causing all sorts of issues, and that's a big cost of production factor. So that's a semi-negative way of looking at things. We'll spin that to a positive in just a sec. But to me, all of these traits that are negatively correlated with skin wrinkle are all very easy to combine when we wind the skin wrinkle back to a plain-bodied start. It's very easy to have fat and muscle, condition score, long staple wool, heaps of lambs that want to grow, and take the flies out of the equation. It's a pretty simple recipe if we start with the skin first. And so if we do that and change increasing wrinkle to decreasing wrinkle, so effectively putting it round the other way, it's very easy to put all of these traits together, and it's then a simple matter of selecting an appropriate amount of wool at an appropriate micron. And this to me is the recipe to have our cake and eat it. If we get all these important traits together first, and that's the majority of traits in a modern merino enterprise, they come together very easily, and keeping in mind that high reproduction then gives us the selection pressure to select the fleece weight and the micron into the mix as well. So that's our chance to have our cake and eat it, and that's what we're doing here. It's quite a bit different to what most of the industry is doing, still focusing on the wool traits first, but that's why we're sort of heading off in a direction that's quite different to most other operations in the industry, and it's quite deliberate. That's just a bit of science behind why our sheep look as plain as they do. Breech wrinkle is the trait that we select on very closely, so we're a good score behind the industry on average. Condition score is the one I want to just bang on about for a minute now. It's critically important, I think. And we've got Ferg in the mix with us. He's the Dr. Fat and Muscle. He's the one that we've taken a lot of our cues from to select the sheep that we do and set the direction that we're heading in. But condition score is heavily compromised by a lot of the other production traits, particularly the wool traits, fleece weight and micron. So we need to be conscious of how we combine these traits and put a balance of traits together that is going to combine them all at valuable levels. Just out of interest, this is a ewe lamb that conceived at 9 months, weaning, or will wean twins, maintaining herself in very good condition and doing it all in very commercial conditions. So it's a good picture of what we're about. Another graph that Ferg put together for us, just showing the genetic condition score and how it affects stocking rate. So I dare say some of the more switched on people may see this quite differently, and we haven't got time to really dive into the depth of this at the moment. It's quite a big space. But genetic condition score is what we're measuring, and if we have sheep under similar conditions that maintain genetic condition score, then we've got the opportunity to increase stocking rate, and stocking rate again has a massive impact on profitability. Just to take this a step further, some of you may have seen the results out of the Trengy sire evaluation. It's a lifetime production sire evaluation. We're involved in that. They measure all sorts of traits, and one of the traits they didn't actually measure was condition score, unfortunately. So when we were out there, we could see that there was a range of condition score from 2 up to probably 5. But if we assume it varied between 2 score to 4 score under the same conditions, then that's an enormous variation in the potential stocking rate of those animals. So just to put a bit more science behind this, if we've got sheep that are 2 scores different in condition under the same conditions, then to get up to standard reference weight, that's a body weight measured at condition score 3, To take the 2 score animals up to condition score 3, we need to reduce their stocking rate to put the same amount of feed into less animals to increase their condition score. It's the reverse for the fat animals. These are the sorts of sheep we're aiming for. We have the opportunity to increase the stocking rate on the same feed, to put the same amount of feed into more animals to reduce their condition score from 4 down to 3. So that's the stocking rate variation. As the previous slide showed, it's 15% per condition score. So if we've got 2 score different in condition across our flock, there's a 30% difference in the stocking rate potential on condition score alone, assuming that's genetic condition score put on under the same conditions. Any questions on that? I know Glo said hold on to the end, but this is a pretty big space. Is that going in? A few nods. Yeah, so it really comes down to measurement per head or per hectare. A lot of stud breeders, myself included, bang on about what our sheep cut per head, or all these different per head cuts or figures, but it's really per hectare that drives the business. So if we've got more animals cutting wool per head, per hectare, then it's a great way of driving the business, but focusing on a per hectare return. So I guess it's a question of goalposts in a sense. The goalposts were set decades ago, focusing on fleece weight and micron. There was no point in selecting for high reproduction. Surplus sheep weren't worth much, lambs weren't worth a lot. So fleece weight and micron was where the goalposts were set. But to me, the goalposts are always going to be moving. The goalposts are now in a very different position, including reproduction, lamb survival, the efficiencies of fetus conversion, and all sorts of other traits that are critically important on top of the wool traits, which are not unimportant. They're still very important, but they're representing 25 to maybe 30% of a modern merino enterprise. And Dave Gregg's here. He'll take us through that in more detail. But in terms of goalposts, this is intramuscular fat. It wasn't on our radar only a few years ago. The genomic testing, the DNA, has opened our eyes to seeing what's going on with intramuscular fat. And it's almost accidental that we've found ourselves in a good position, and I suspect it's linked to selection for fat that has seen us in a pretty good spot for intramuscular fat. But now that we have this information, it's just another adjustment in the goalpost. We'll use this information to make some subtle selection towards IMF. Just avoid the disasters and select for the animals that have all the traits we want with better IMF. And that's us. Thank you.